60 of the Standing Committee on Finance. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. All witnesses have completed the required connection test in advance of the meeting. I would now like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Whether participating in person or via Zoom, the clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. Pursuant to Standing Order 83.1, the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 26, 2024, the committee is resuming its study on the pre-budget consultations in advance of the 2025 budget. Now I'd like to welcome our witnesses. So with us today as a individual, we have lawyer Nathan Hume. Also as an individual, barrister and solicitor Jeffrey Simser. From the Business Higher Education Roundtable, with us we have Chief Officer, Research and Development, Matthew McKean, Chief Executive Officer, Valerie Walker, joining us, welcome. And from the Canadian Gas Association, its Vice President of Strategy and Delivery, Paul Chiliak, is joining us. From the École de Technologie Supérieure, we have the Director General, Chief Executive Officer, Kathy Begg, and the Executive Director of Institute Adaptation, I guess it would be Eric Bosco. And from the Mortgage Professionals of Canada, we have its President and Chief Executive Officer, Lauren Vandenberg. So each of the witnesses, you will have up to 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and that will be before we move to the members' questions. We will be starting with the individuals, and Nathan Hume, please.
Thank you. Bonjour, Finance Committee. You've already heard a lot about the financialization of housing, its impacts on Canadian families and our economy. You've also heard a lot about the imbalance between housing supply and housing demand, the causes of that imbalance from red tape to population growth. But I'm here today to suggest a new way of thinking about this problem and a new solution. We have a house price crisis in Canada. It's simple. The prices are simply too high. To solve that crisis, we do need more homes, but we also need more financial innovation. We need to build those homes, and we need to build a national market in house prices. We can do both. We have the knowledge. We have the financial infrastructure. We can fix this problem right now. We can build a national market in house prices before I can build a single home in Vancouver. Our high house prices drive the other factors behind the housing crisis. They magnify the effect of interest rates. They attract speculative demand. For many people, they're the only investment game. And high price expectations can constrain supply by inhibiting sales and driving up the cost of construction. There are two federal policies that keep our house prices high. There's the principal residence exemption, which gives real estate a tax advantage that no other asset class enjoys. And there are CMHC mortgage insurance and securitization programs that give real estate a financial advantage of cheap and abundant credit. Right? Mortgage insurance thresholds keep moving higher and higher and keep anchoring our prices higher and higher. It was $500,000, now it's $1 million, then it's $1.5 million, and most recently it's moved to $2 million with a secondary suite. These policies have created a Canadian version of the Greenspan put. Our prices always increase and are always expected to increase because the government is always there to back them up with more cheap credit and tax incentives. And those increases just drive more investor demand. They offer outsized returns with limited risk. And that's why you end up with 34% of condos in my home province of BC owned by investors. And the only way to get exposure to that great return is to buy a house. If you want to talk about gatekeeping, it's a great example. The only way to get access to those amazing returns is to buy a house, take on a mortgage. It doesn't have to be this way. What we call housing demand is actually demand for two different goods. There are houses that offer shelter, status, control over land, and there is house prices, which offer those great investment returns, supported by government policy. Instead of bundling those two goods together like we have for decades, we can and should find ways to separate them and satisfy the demand for financial exposure to house prices with new financial products. New financial instruments, futures contracts, house price ETFs would be based on house prices and could give investors direct exposure to the house prices they want without requiring them to buy homes. These products would build on our existing financial and regulatory frameworks. They would build on our tradition of financial innovation where the first ETF was created in Canada. We can keep doing this. We can already buy ETFs that give us exposure to weird exotic assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, S&P volatility, carbon credits, but we can't buy exposure to house prices, the most important asset class in the country. A house price ETF would absorb speculative demand and enable young families and new Canadians to save down payments that track house prices. They wouldn't fall behind. They could be held in tax-free accounts to mimic the benefits of home ownership. A renter could combine those two things and get something very similar to owning a home. They would also be compatible with other federal efforts to build more houses like the Accelerator Fund. They're different from REITs in two important ways. First, they would not involve the purchase of houses. They wouldn't take any shelter off the market. And second, they would provide direct exposure to house prices, not cash flows of rental properties. So I'm saying just give the people what they want, because clearly what they want is more house prices, more exposure to house prices. And I think this committee and the federal government can take steps to advance this concept by expressing interest in and support for new financial instruments that absorb speculative housing demand, studying the concepts in order to identify and resolve technical issues like defining the reference price for this instrument, and mandating the CMHC to provide specific financial support, such as credit support for the underlying swap agreements. We have a house price crisis. We can solve it. Financial innovation itself is not the problem. We can build houses and a national house price market, and we can do it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hume. And now we'll hear from, as an individual, Jeffrey Simser, please.
Thank you. I'm an expert in money laundering, and I am here to offer you 5 ideas that the government could consider. The first is, and I was Canada's first director of civil asset forfeiture. The first is this: the Proceeds of Crime Money Laundering Terrorist Financing Act was recently amended to add a structuring provision. All good. I'm suggesting it be repealed. I'm suggesting that instead you port it and move it into the criminal code. And here's why. Canada has been criticized in the past by the Financial Action Task Force for not using our existing money laundering offenses in prosecutions. For example, we use Section 354, which is possession of proceeds of crime, instead of the money laundering prosecution. And the reason for this is pretty simple. The penal consequences are the same, and it's much more difficult to take a judge through the money laundering provisions. And even though there have been changes to the mens rea of that, it's still a problematic provision to use because the prosecutor has to find a predicate offense. And of course, organized crime obviously organizes their affairs to separate their crime from their money as a risk mitigation strategy, and it makes it much less likely to prosecute on money laundering. So my recommendation is to bring the structuring offense out of the PCML-TFA and make it a designated offense under the code so that a prosecution for money laundering would be a prosecution for money laundering, not for the predicate crime. I'll give you a second idea that's similar. So Project Collector out of Alberta interdicted a long-standing money laundering operation. They were moving $200,000 per suitcase across between Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. They might have moved upwards of $1 billion in cash, but the problem is airport screening could not stop them. There was no problem moving $200,000 in a suitcase. Try to put a bottle of hand lotion in your suitcase, you'll have a problem, not $200,000. So my idea here is that we add to the code a provision for bulk cash smuggling. There is a provision in the U.S. code that's similar. That would be an offense. And again, you could prosecute a money launderer for money laundering. Finally, I have 3 points about civil asset forfeiture. The first is around FinTrack. So in the spring, the government announced in the budget that they would finally allow FinTrack to share information with civil forfeiture authorities. We've been hoping for this for almost 25 years. That's a really good thing. It's not in place yet. But there is a risk to be managed because in a civil forfeiture case, the director of civil forfeiture is allowed, using the civil process, to compel information from the bad guy, from the respondent. And they're deemed to undertake to that defendant or respondent not to use that information for any other purpose. And the problem is that FinTrack routinely collects something called a VIR, Voluntary Information Report, from police, and then they put that into their database. And so there is a big risk that if they put civil forfeiture information into a database and then it's used to lay charges and to prosecute someone, that there'll be a defense motion 5 or 6 years later that will have the case thrown out because there's a derivative use problem. So what I suggest here is that the Standing Committee amend the PCML TFA to provide clarity on how their process works and to ask them to work with the 9 civil forfeiture jurisdictions to ensure that the information can be transferred without that problem occurring. My fourth brief thought is around the RCMP. So the RCMP has an operational manual that guides their members about how to conduct investigations and how to address civil forfeiture. And what the manual says right now is civil forfeiture is always a last resort, and that's wrong. That might have been right 25 years ago. It's wrong now, and I think that they should change the protocols within their operational manual to make civil forfeiture part of the planning early on cases. And this isn't about the primacy of a criminal prosecution. No one argues that should be first. But what's happening right now is files are being held back because it's last resort. And by the time it gets to civil forfeiture, nothing can be done. And the bad guys are laughing all the way to the bank because they get their tainted assets returned. And my final thought is about a gap in the Bank Act, which I know sounds unusual, but under the Bank Act, Section 461 of the Bank Act says that a bank deposit account is deemed to exist at the branch where it was started. We have a couple of jurisdictions, PEI and Newfoundland, for example, that don't have civil forfeiture. So what we're seeing is someone could set up an account in Charlottetown, do all of their dirty business in Vancouver, and then when the civil forfeiture authority in BC comes forward, they can say you don't have jurisdiction because it's a PEI bank account and there's no civil forfeiture there. So that's something that I think would be a simple legislative fix to 461. Allow a court to say where the bank account is for the purposes of a civil forfeiture proceeding. That is where it's transacted, and then you'll close that loophole. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Simser. And now we'll go to the Business Higher Education Roundtable and its Chief Executive Officer, Valerie Walker, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. I almost feel like I need to start by saying, and now for something completely different. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Val Walker, and I am the CEO of the Business and Higher Education Roundtable, or BHER. I'm joined today by my colleague, Matthew McKean, who is our Chief R&D Officer. We are a national member-based nonprofit. We're the only organization in the country that brings together leaders from our country's top post-secondary institutions and companies to tackle the most pressing challenges facing Canada's economy and workforce. Since 2019, we've played a critical role in helping post-secondary institutions and businesses, especially small and medium-sized companies, create work experiences for young people before they graduate. What we do is incredibly important because we know that businesses need people and young people need jobs. We also know that connecting students to employers through what we call work-integrated learning, or just WIL for short, remains the most effective way to build the skilled talent pipelines that enable Canada's businesses to be productive, innovative, and grow. Developing the talent we need to work in growing and in-demand sectors like the skilled trades, healthcare, AI, and clean energy doesn't happen organically. It requires curated programs, partnerships, and capacity building. BHER is at the forefront of delivering solutions. We are uniquely positioned to deliver on the Government of Canada's commitment to get every student some work experience before they graduate. We do this by developing partnerships between post-secondary institutions and companies, and we often involve other intermediary organizations like local chambers of commerce and regional economic development groups. We work with those partners to create or scale work integrated learning programs where they didn't exist before and where they're needed most. We're not limited to one sector of the economy, but can respond to Canada's evolving labor market priorities by working across industries and sectors and in every region of the country. This flexibility allows us to ensure that our programs are aligned and directly with the current and future needs of this economy. And our work has big impact and big outcomes. To date, we have created nearly 65,000 work integrated learning opportunities for young people. We've partnered with more than 200 post-secondary institutions and have a pan-Canadian network of nearly 10,000 employers. We've helped a diverse range of students. 50% of them are women, 45% of them are visible minorities. We talked with SME owners across Canada before we started out on this journey, hundreds of them, and what they told us was that the biggest barrier they faced to hiring students or entry-level talent wasn't paying the wages, but rather it's finding, hiring, and mentoring capacity, covering the project costs associated with creating quality experiences, or making the post-secondary connections in the first place. That's what we do. That's what we use our funds currently provided by the Government of Canada to pay for, the capacity building and the partnership development. We get the employers to pay the salaries. Our exit surveys show that for more than 2/3 of our employer partners have hired or plan to hire their BHER students, and they're also saving big on recruitment and retention costs. And here's the thing that might really resonate with this committee in particular. Our model is not only highly effective, but it's also very cost effective. In 2022-2023, BHER provided 20% of Canada's federally funded work integrated learning programming for about 2% of the federal WIL funding envelope. And we had a recent evaluation by ISED that confirmed the effectiveness of our programs and our differentiated value and role in the WIL ecosystem. And we would very much like to continue to do this important work. We are requesting $32.5 million of a federal reinvestment over 5 years to expand our impact. With this reinvestment, we will continue to leverage our relationships with our industry members and large companies to support the small and medium-sized companies to do more WIL. We'll get more companies to pay more students. We'll work with the provinces and territories to ensure share responsibility and buy-in. And we'll build a program worth more than $250 million. In other words, ensuring an 8-to-1 return on the Government of Canada's investment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Now we're going to hear from the Canadian Gas Association and its Vice President, Paul Chelyak.
Great, thank you, Chair, and hello, committee members. My remarks today will focus on two areas. The first is setting a new narrative for Canadian energy that aligns with the energy trilemma. And the second is a proposal to leverage Canada's vast natural gas infrastructure system. The Canadian Gas Association members deliver natural gas through 600,000 kilometers of pipeline infrastructure, connecting over 20 million Canadians. This infrastructure spans 8 provinces and 1 territory, and through it, we deliver 40% of Canada's energy needs, nearly double that of the electricity system. As energy companies serving all forms of consumers, from large industries to homeowners, we are acutely aware of Canada's productivity and affordability challenge. Energy as an input cost forms part of that productivity equation. We witness firsthand the economic benefit of connecting Canadians via their homes and their industries to natural gas. More affordable energy means improved bottom lines, more disposable income, and economic growth. The Government of Canada has an opportunity to put the conditions in place to bring affordable natural gas and renewable gases to more Canadians. So where do we start? First, we need to work together as a nation to get the message right. I'm just back from meetings in Cairo where dozens of countries met to discuss the energy and the investment landscape around the world. The discussion centered on opportunities in the United States, in Europe, and in developing countries. Canada simply was not on the radar. How do we change this? It starts with a new narrative, a narrative that reflects our energy strengths as a nation, a narrative that speaks positively about our resources, our domestic industry, and our infrastructure. So what is the new narrative? It's one that speaks to and balances each element of the energy trilemma: affordability, reliability, sustainability. Balancing the trilemma must be at the heart of Canada's energy and environmental policy and decision-making. Too much focus on any one source of energy or one aspect of the trilemma will lead to unintended consequences. We must recognize the world is in an era of energy addition. We need more energy, not less. And our narrative must be accompanied by durable policy that attracts capital. Our allies are vying for investment the same way that we are. The next 5 years will be pivotal, with reshoring of manufacturing and the AI data center opportunity. Canada should be pursuing both with vigor, and natural gas is a central place. If we get the message right and we get the policy right, how can we leverage the gas system? Hundreds of thousands of Canadians live close to, but are not connected to the gas system. They rely on higher cost and higher emitting fuels such as heating oil and propane. To remedy this, we recommend a public-private partnership to co-fund the extension of the gas infrastructure to data centers, farming and rural communities, and Indigenous nations. This would not be the first instance of a partnership. There have been several of them over the years, dating back to the 80s. A partnership would allow the energy delivery company to connect communities within close proximity to the gas system, often less than 10 kilometers away. We have seen leadership in Ontario where the natural gas expansion program funded by the Government of Ontario will connect 17,000 homes and businesses to the gas system in 59 communities. The end result is 30 to 50% savings on energy costs. A federal program could expand this opportunity for the rest of Canada, lowering heating costs and putting money into the pocketbooks of households. The industry stands ready to bring shovel-ready projects, along with patient capital and a strong Canadian workforce. In the coming weeks, the CGA will be releasing a national policy document that outlines several gas energy opportunities for Canada, including the one I've mentioned today. We look forward to advancing this and other opportunities in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chelyak. And now to École de Technologie Supérieure, and we have Ms. Kathy Begg as its spokesperson. Yep.
Mesdames et Messieurs les membres.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, I would like to thank you sincerely for inviting me to take part in this important pre-budget consultation exercise. It is an honor for the École de Technologie Supérieure to contribute to the consultation exercise. And it is involving the process of reflection, which aims to guide the priorities of the next federal budget. Today, I'd like to present two subjects and goals that are crucial to Canada's economic, technological, and environmental future: the Adaptee Institute and funding for deep tech incubators, such as Centrec, ETI's leading edge incubator. Climate change is causing our infrastructure to age and increasing maintenance costs. We have to act. We have to develop new approaches, new materials, new designs, new construction technologies, which will strengthen our existing infrastructure to build more resilient cities. On these issues, Canada is at a decisive turning point and should seize the opportunity to become a world leader in adapting and being resilient. Sustained investment in education and research and the innovation that flows from them are making and will continue to make the difference in meeting the challenges of the future. ETS has developed an innovative model with the Adaptee Institute, a one-stop shop that brings together the country's top researchers to think about concrete solutions to current and future challenges. This model facilitates multidisciplinary collaboration and accelerates the transfer of knowledge to meet the needs of industry and our communities. Already, more than 60 promising projects are underway at our institute, piloted by 27 universities in Canada and abroad.
If you could just start speaking, and then we'll
Okay,
let
so
you know. Yeah.
face aux défis climatiques,
In the face of climate challenges, it is imperative to accelerate investment. We are therefore requesting funding of $49 million over 7 years to roll out this model on a nationwide scale, with a target of $163 million from research collaborations. This will enable us to pursue current projects and increase our intervention capacity across the country. More specifically, the ADAPT Institute, with its proven model, makes it possible to connect researchers, businesses, and governments to find solutions adapted to each context. We want to accelerate the development of research and innovation projects, and we want to strengthen the resilience of our communities. ADAPT Institute calls on the government to support cutting-edge research into adaptation for climate change. By strengthening the resilience of our infrastructure, we are not only preparing our country to face climate challenges, but we are also creating a framework which is conducive to technological innovation. We therefore recommend that you help fund the ADAPT Institute to promote resilient infrastructure and a sustainable economy in Canada. Our second recommendation is to increase investment in startup incubators, which specialize in deep tech, in order to stimulate innovation and the Canadian economy overall. Deep tech, with its transformative potential, is at the heart of this revolution. ATS is home to a specialized deep tech incubator, Centec, ranked among the top 10 in the world by UBE, which supports companies in cutting-edge fields such as artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and other high-tech sectors. Deep tech incubators in Canada face a major challenge: underfunding. Tech startups need greater resources and longer periods of support than traditional startups to ensure their success and survival. However, existing funding programs are not adapted to their specific needs, thus limiting their development and our ability to compete on the international stage. To remedy this situation, we are proposing the establishment of a national targeted funding program of $62 million over 5 years, dedicated specifically to deep tech incubators. This program, based on a competitive call for projects model, would support a network of some 15 incubators across the country, thus stimulating the innovative ecosystem and creating thousands of highly skilled jobs. In conclusion, these recommendations reflect ATE's commitment to making a significant contribution to Canada's ecological transition and innovation, as well as to stimulating its economy and demonstrating its global leadership by supporting the ADAPT Institute and deep tech incubators like CanTech. The Government of Canada could prepare Canada for a more resilient and innovative future. I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering any questions you have about how we can change Canada's future in terms of technology.
And now we're going to hear from the Mortgage Professionals of Canada, and Lauren Vanderberg, please, for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and esteemed members of the committee. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. It's an honor to appear before you today on behalf of Mortgage Professionals Canada, also known as MPC to our friends, and I think we're all friends now. I'd like to begin by sincerely thanking all members of this committee for your time and your attention to the housing challenges our country is facing. MPC represents over 15,000 members, including mortgage brokers, lenders, insurers, and other professionals who help Canadians navigate the housing market. Our members work every day with individuals and families making one of the most important financial decisions of their lives, securing a home. Today, I will discuss our pre-budget submission and highlight both the progress made and the ongoing work required to ensure access to homeownership remains within reach for all Canadians. Housing affordability is, rightfully, one of the most pressing concerns for this government and for all parties represented here today. There is widespread recognition that Canada is facing a housing crisis, and this challenge has only grown more urgent in recent years due to rising interest rates, inflation, and economic pressures on households. I want to commend the federal government and members of all parties for their efforts to address these challenges, particularly the important steps introduced in Budget 2024-25. These initiatives represent a significant move towards alleviating some of the pressures on Canadian homeowners and prospective buyers, and we're grateful for this action. Housing is now a national priority, and this is due in large part to the advocacy efforts of groups like MPC and other stakeholders in the housing sector. We've worked tirelessly to ensure that the voices of Canada's mortgage professionals are heard, and we are proud to see housing issues receiving the serious attention they deserve. Now, several recommendations from MPC's pre-budget submission have already been partly addressed, and we very much appreciate what this represents for all homeowners across the country. For instance, we're very pleased to see the introduction of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which aims to increase housing supply, and the elimination of the GST on new purpose-built rentals. These measures are critical to addressing housing affordability. Moreover, the increase in the ceiling for insured mortgages from 1 to 1.5 million is a crucial step forward. This adjustment reflects today's housing market realities, particularly in cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where housing prices are significantly higher. We also welcome the easing of rules around 30-year amortization periods, which provides buyers with greater flexibility and lower monthly payments. This is especially beneficial for first-time buyers and younger Canadians who are trying to enter the market. Additionally, we are encouraged by the government regulator's decision to relax stress test rules at mortgage renewal. These actions represent significant progress, and we commend the government for implementing these changes. However, there are still critical areas that need further attention. Two important issues remain unresolved, and I'd like to highlight them now. The first is the urgent need for a digital income verification tool. Currently, mortgage applicants must provide income verification through outdated manual methods, which are both time-consuming and susceptible to fraud. A secure digital tool provided by the CRA would allow trusted third parties in the mortgage industry to instantly verify income, reduce fraud, and improve efficiency for home buyers and lenders alike. This tool is essential for protecting the integrity of our mortgage system and for enhancing consumer confidence. The second unresolved issue is the establishment of a permanent housing roundtable. This roundtable would bring together all levels of government, industry leaders, and civil society to engage in ongoing dialogue and develop long-term solutions to the housing affordability crisis. While provincial and municipal governments have made commendable efforts to address housing barriers, a coordinated federal effort is still needed. A permanent forum for collaboration would ensure that Canada's housing challenges are addressed holistically, and it would demonstrate the government's continued commitment to solving this crisis. At MPC, we strongly believe in the importance of ensuring access to homeownership for all Canadians. Homeownership is a cornerstone of financial stability and is vital for building strong, resilient communities across the country. Unfortunately, for many Canadians, homeownership is becoming increasingly difficult to attain. The rising cost of housing, coupled with stagnant wages and higher borrowing costs, presents significant barriers for first-time homebuyers in particular. Extending the amortization period for insured mortgages to 30 years, as has been done, and increasing the insured mortgage ceiling to 1.5 million are important steps. We must continue working to make homeownership a reality for more Canadians. We also urge the government to combine the Home Buyers Plan with a first-time home savings account. This would simplify the process for first-time buyers and allow them to better manage their savings for a down payment, giving them a clear path to homeownership. In conclusion, while we acknowledge the progress made by the government so far, there is still more work to be done to address the housing affordability crisis in Canada. These initiatives are particularly crucial to ensuring that more Canadians, particularly younger generations, can achieve that dream of homeownership. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vandenberg, and I'm sure the members are eager to ask questions, and that's where we're going right now. So we're starting with all the parties will have up to 6 minutes to ask questions. We are starting with MP Pat Kelly first.
Thank you. Mike? Thank you. My first question is for MPC. We had testimony on Tuesday about the state of affordability for younger working people in Canada. We had one of your members, Ron Butler, had told the committee that the dream is dead, that working Canadians cannot afford to buy their first home in most of Canada's cities. Is that do your members find in their grassroots work at street level? Do they have they had the same experience?
Thank you so much for the question. I think housing affordability remains the most critical financial challenge facing Canadian households today, particularly in urban centres. Housing costs are continuing to outpace incomes. We're looking at medium income households now spending up to 63.5% of their income on housing, according to, I think, the latest report from RBC. Major cities like Toronto, like Vancouver, families are spending as much as 84% and 106% of their income on housing, which makes saving for homeownership nearly impossible. Affordability isn't just a local issue. It's very much a national crisis and requires a coordinated effort across all levels of government. We didn't get here overnight, and our housing affordability crisis has been influenced by multiple factors. And ensuring that access to homeownership, that the dream doesn't die, it's not just an economic issue, but also a matter of, I think, national well-being, which affects the social fabric of our communities.
Thank you. Mr. Chaliak, you said you were in Cairo and Canada in a discussion, presumably about accessing gas in that region, and Canada wasn't even discussed. Is that, did I understand that part correctly?
Yeah, the meetings were focused on, the next generation of energy investments. That's everything from hydrogen production to carbon capture to liquefied natural gas export terminals. And perhaps the way of summarizing it best was there's a strong environmental plan for Canada that has been well understood and articulated. There isn't a similar plan for energy.
Okay, so Canada was not on the map in a discussion, international forum discussing energy investment. What are Canada's gas reserves in comparison to other gas jurisdictions?
Yeah, the Canadian gas reserves are in the hundreds of years.
Rank order among nations.
We have the second highest reserves of open countries in the world, second to the United States.
So Canada has the second largest reserves, and nobody wants to talk about investing in our industry. Is that correct?
Not nobody, but it's a challenging proposition.
Okay, I just at the beginning you said that we weren't even that Canada wasn't discussed. So, but it's pretty marginal then. The international investment community is not particularly interested in the second largest reserve jurisdiction. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. What are some of the reasons why the international investment community would not be interested in investing in the second largest proven reserve open country?
I think the reasons are fairly well documented and understood, and they date back a while. Cost overruns, permitting delays, approval processes. Regulation's always going to be an issue.
Bill C-69 in particular?
I wouldn't say that necessarily. I would say that the environmental permitting process has increased in complexity, not just in Canada, but around the world. I think Canada stands out as an area that has some particular issues it needs to solve in that regard, and I think that contributes to my comments.
Okay, so they're international, some of the problems, but yet investors are talking about and making investments in other jurisdictions, but not Canada.
Yeah, it's not strictly a regulatory issue. It's a market access issue. The U.S. Gulf Coast, for example, quick access to many global markets.
Right. So in Canada, what would give Canada better market access?
I think a vision for the country, right? I think we have yet to encapsulate what we want to be on LNG, for example. There are different opinions about the opportunity for LNG. I don't think there's a cohesive narrative on that. And investors look for narratives.
The Prime Minister of Canada said there's no business case for LNG. So if you disagree with that characterization, this is a great opportunity for you to say so and to be clear with this committee about whether or not there is a business case for LNG or whether there could be under the right regulation or the right political will or what it would take to make that business case.
I would say we have several LNG projects permitted and under construction on Canada's west coast. So the industry is evolving and is moving forward. There's always more we could do. Canada's east coast does present some challenging economics to export LNG off of Canada's east coast. So that statement around the economics of LNG, I think when they pertain to Canada's east coast, do hold some validity.
Okay. Is there a time for another question? All right, great. And then what about the West Coast? Why is the investment community worldwide not stepping up to try and invest in Canadian infrastructure on that coast?
Yeah, I mean, they are. I think the challenge we're seeing is the large pipeline that connects the current project, LNG Canada, had some cost overruns to it that the investment community sees. And so, when there's cost overruns on projects or permitting issues, the investment community will take note of that.
All right.
Thank you, MP Cowie. Now to MP Baker.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here. Fascinating insights on a range of topics. And I'm sorry I won't be able to ask you all questions, but thank you for your contributions and for taking the time to be with us here today and offer us your insight. Appreciate that. I'm going to start with Ms. Walker, if I may. Just for the folks who are watching at home, or my constituents who might be watching this exchange or reading some of this testimony, or even for the report that we end up writing for the Minister of Finance, can you just explain what is work integrated learning?
Thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and it's not one that has the same answer that I would have given you 10 years ago. It is, for most people, the idea of a co-op placement or an internship, some opportunity for a student to get some exposure to how work works, before they finish school. What we've learned, especially through the pandemic, is that the variety of experiences for students that are valuable to them and for employers, especially small and medium-sized companies who may not be able to afford a 4-month traditional structured work experience, have a lot of opportunity to still engage with students and understand the value that they can bring to their businesses through, for example, smaller applied research projects, or a hackathon where a bunch of students participate and solve one particular issue. So we pride ourselves at BHER to continue to work with employers to broaden the number of things that we would define as work integrated learning, as long as they provide value to the student and value to the employer.
Okay. And so can you help me understand what role you play in that? Like, why is it that this doesn't just happen naturally? Why don't companies create these opportunities, or why don't young people find them, or a combination of both on their own without your assistance?
So thank you again for the question. There's a couple things I would say to that. One, we initially thought what was needed was some kind of matching platform. It should be obvious. We have students who need work experience, and we have employers who need students. That's it. Create a platform. They'll find each other. Emphatically, we have proven over the last 5 years that is not enough. The need for curated partnership development is key. Our data support that. We can provide some of the broad resources that make it easier for companies to find and create quality experiences, but we need partners working at the regional and local levels who are the ones who best understand their particular local labor market needs, who are the best positioned to execute on the specific needs that those communities have. So we support them and build capacity for them to provide those experiences locally.
Got it. So what I hear you saying is that you're sort of helping the businesses, a lot of them are small and medium-sized businesses, who may not otherwise have the capacity or the expertise or the experience to organize this or to structure these opportunities, and you help structure it for them. Am I right? Is that fair?
That's right. Maybe I would ask my colleague Matthew at this point to provide a bit of color to that, to expand on what we actually do with the funding that we receive.
Sure thing. Thank you for the question. As Val mentioned in her opening remarks, we talked to small and medium-sized business owners before we started this journey, hundreds of them, 500 or 600, and we went sector by sector and region by region. And asked them what they needed to do more work integrated learning if they or to do it if they weren't. And more often than not, as Val said, it wasn't paying the student that was the barrier. It was building that HR capacity to create the experiences, or figuring out the intricacies of how to mentor students or provide quality assessment, or creating programs where they just didn't exist whatsoever by partnering with that local post-secondary institution. And so that's the capacity building function and partnership function that we offer and that we see as critical to the ecosystem.
This is great, and I think I only have a couple minutes left or so. I can really relate to this. I know when I was younger, I don't know what age group you target, but man, I went to school, I worked hard, I had good grades in university, and then I got out of university and I couldn't find a job. And I struggled and struggled and struggled. And I know many others do. And I speak to many, that's right, and then I became an MP. So there's hope for me after all, I suppose. But it is precarious work, yeah. But I wonder about for me, so I can really relate to the need, and I speak with a lot of constituents who come to me, frankly, and ask me if I can help their son or daughter find a job that's appropriate. So I only have a minute left. I think could you just help, just again, for folks at home, what is it that, if you think about what is the value, can you talk about how much funding you've received from the federal government, how many placements that's created, and the impact it's had in about 45 seconds or less?
I can. To date, we have received a total of just shy of $17 million. And with that funding from the federal government, we have leveraged it with private sector employer cash and in kind, but cash for the salaries to the about $270 million. On top of that, we have another close to, in just the last 2 years, a couple $1 million that our delivery partners provide in kind. So it is a very good, clear return on investment with that funding. With that money, like I said in my opening remarks, we have created more than 65,000 opportunities for students across the country with close to 10,000 companies who now understand and have that capacity to do more in future years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Baker, and to MP Samarino, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Mes questions seront...
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My questions are for Madame Beg from l'École des Technologies Supérieures. I would like to thank all members of the panel today because what you have brought us is some very rich content. Madam, you said that you have 60 projects underway. We'd like to have a more specific idea. Can you give us some examples of the types of projects that are underway at the Institute? Thank you very much for your question. We can give you examples, but I do have the director of the Institute with me, and I will invite him to speak to you directly. Yes, with great pleasure. We have more than 60 projects. One of the things I'd like to mention is that half of these projects are with the federal government, with public services, PSPC, and I'm very happy that the federal government is taking this issue of climate change very seriously. I'll give you a couple of examples of what we are doing. We have been involved in a project of restoring and modernizing the parliamentary precinct where we find ourselves today. This is something that is emblematic of all Canadians. It's the Parliament of Canada. But we also deal with smaller cities where they have to face all the challenges of climate change. With the infrastructure and so on, the roads and the riverways, the waterways. There are issues of thermal energy and also the freezing and the defrosting of that are so rapid now. These cycles are so rapid now, and that has a great effect on masonry, a negative effect. And we also work on how to build new infrastructure. Recently, businesses have been asking us to come up with some new products. They would like the federal government to be an initial client for these products. But the problem that they set out to us was that PSPC is not able to deal with all of the characteristics of the work that is underway. Let me give you an example. There is a project that is underway dealing with the forestry industry that could lead to a new environmentally friendly insulation project based on forestry plants and so on. And so that type of expertise that we have is to characterize the product and set out the advantages and disadvantages of a new environmentally friendly type of product vis-a-vis traditional legacy products. It is a scientific confirmation that we produce, that it is something that we do. Another example is our work with the municipalities. We know that the municipalities are greatly affected by climate change, and they have to respond to that challenge. St. Marthe is a rural community facing an issue when there is an overabundance of water. Their filtration system is overwhelmed, and there's more water that stays on the soil. The filtering system, therefore, it does not function as it should, and there is a direct effect on the sewer and water systems. So we want to be able to clean up the water that comes out of their clean water and wastewater systems. Last year, we had another case with one of the municipalities in Quebec. There were 130 participants, and there was a panel that we set up with the mayors of small cities and villages. It was a day where they came together, spoke together. We involved researchers, private industry, and other members of the municipalities that were there to discuss the problems that they were facing. Businesses participated as well, and we were able to speak to products and services in general terms. This is one of the objectives that we have. We want to be able to set up projects like this, but that's the experience that we have. And that day, it was announced that there was more than $1 million research project that would be underway to fight climate change, to help researchers in the municipalities. And there was a $200,000 earmarked as well for the project like that. Well, that's really impressive, and I thank you for your answer. I do have a second question, and perhaps you can maybe, if we run out of time, use other rounds of questioning to just complete your thinking. But here it is. Shernick is a model that exists in Quebec, province-wide. How can local communities be helped by that, particularly those remote communities? How can that help them fight climate change if there were federal funding that were available to them? I had a foresight. I predicted that. I thought so.
Your answer together, and then when we have more time in the next round, that you'll have an opportunity to answer. Okay. Merci, MP Sainte-Marie, and to MP Davis.
Thank you, Mr. St.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for fascinating testimony on a wide variety of subjects. Mr. Hume, if I can begin with you. In September, the federal government announced it will increase the cap on insured mortgages to 1.5 million from $1 million, effective December 15th. In addition, purchasers will be able to take out loans for a 30-year period if they are first-time home buyers or if they're buying a newly built house. In your view, what impact will these measures have on housing prices?
Thank you for the question. I think the evidence from the last 30 years is very clear that when the federal government takes those steps, increases amortization periods at the CMHC, and increases mortgage insurance limits, prices go up and prices stay up. They act as anchors. They set people's expectations, and people across the country and from elsewhere invest accordingly.
It's a bit of a conundrum, isn't it? Because when we make it easier for first-time buyers to buy a house, we increase demand. And if we have a supply issue, it would seem that the basic laws of supply and demand would mean that we have more people chasing fewer stock, thereby driving prices up. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, on October 10th, the federal government announced that it will reform mortgage insurance rules to allow the refinancing to help cover the costs of building secondary suites starting in January. I think you commented on that in your opening remarks. In your view, what impact will that measure have on housing supply in Canada?
I think it will have a limited impact on housing supply. I remember the announcement in which the minister spoke of grandparents building secondary suites for their grandchildren to attend university. And although that's a nice thought, I do not think that is going to have a meaningful impact on the number of homes available for families to raise houses and for long-term solutions.
Okay. Now, maybe turning to some solutions that might work. You have a fascinating proposal for a housing ETF. I'd like to direct some questions to that. Are there currently any regulatory barriers to establishing a housing ETF in Canada?
Not that I'm aware of, no. This is a plug-and-play solution. We have ETFs for almost anything you can imagine, not houses. I do not have an answer for why that's the case right now.
So would it be possible for the private sector to develop a market, to create a product that would satisfy that market?
I think the private sector is the only sector that can create this product, and I encourage every financial institution to look into it, and hopefully this committee and this government can take steps to encourage them to do so.
Okay. Now, you sort of touched on this. I want to give you a chance to expand more on this. It's a very novel proposal. I don't think we've heard at this committee, at least I haven't. What market trends or data support the need for a housing ETF at this time? And again, what would you think would be the result of such a product?
I think the main market trend is the one that I mentioned briefly during my remarks, the extensive amount of speculative demand, investor-owned housing in Canada, especially in the cities I've read. In Vancouver, it's 34% of condos. In some cities in Ontario, it's upwards of 85%, I believe, in London of condos are investor-owned. These percentages are mind-boggling. And an house price ETF could absorb a significant amount of speculative or investor demand. It would give that demand another channel in which to get access to house prices without taking up housing supply. Mm-hmm. And so it would not have the same impact on the families that you talked about needing to get shelter and houses.
Now, Prime Minister Trudeau has noted that his government aims to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians without bringing down home prices for existing homeowners. In May 24 in the Globe and Mail, he was quoted as saying the following: "Housing needs to retain its value. It's a huge part of people's potential for retirement and future nest egg." In your view, are those compatible goals?
I would say in response to that, it sounds like all gas with just a little bit of brakes. And that's been consistent with this government's housing policy for quite a long time. The federal government, I don't mean this particular instantiation. I think it's a frank admission of the perceived political constraints that governments face, which is another unintended consequence of the programs that I mentioned during my opening remarks. We know that many households are dependent on house prices to finance their retirement, and a lot of people are concerned about that. And I don't think that's wrong. I know that in British Columbia, the average household savings rate for the past 25 years is 0.3% of income being saved. And if you strip out the 2 COVID stimulus years, it's negative 0.4% over 23 years. Households aren't saving, which goes to the comments from the witness from the MPC. So I understand that people feel constrained and are constrained. A house price ETF would help to loosen some of those political constraints by giving investor demand another channel in which to flow, reducing the pressure on our housing stock, and hopefully helping all of us find more tools, more ways to address this problem instead of less. We really shouldn't look the other way when we've got new financial opportunities and instruments that could help us solve the problem.
10 seconds.
Nailed it.
Just quickly, what's the role of the federal government in building non-market housing, and how might that impact the situation?
Well, I think that the proposal I've put forward today would only complement non-market housing. It's not meant to supplement or detract from it. The federal government can certainly continue to play that role and provide the shelter that people need.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Davies. And now, witnesses, members, we are moving to our second round of questions. Just times are a little different on these rounds. And we're starting with MP Chambers for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Simser, thank you for your testimony today, and also I appreciate the fact that, did I hear correctly, none of your proposals actually cost the government any money, right? Okay, thank you very much. I also appreciate the fact that it seems to me like you're trying to beef up the criminal code versus the existing approach through the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act, correct? Yes. And is that primarily because we don't have a great track record of convictions and prosecutions for money laundering offenses?
Yeah, no, that's correct. We don't have a very good record of charging and prosecuting, and when we do prosecute, we're not all that successful in terms of what the outcomes are. It takes a long time, and we don't get very good jail time.
Right. If I was an alien and I had arrived just above Earth and I looked at Canada, I would think we have no money laundering in Canada, right? Because we don't have a lot of convictions. Is that would that be a fair assessment?
If you were truly an outsider, I suppose, but if you are an organized criminal with a Mexican cartel, this is a playground for you.
Right, so this is where they want to come, the bad guys.
Absolutely, they do. And right now, we do have a big problem where we have fentanyl and methamphetamine on our streets. They're coming from Mexican cartels, and actions that the Chinese government took about 10 or 15 years ago have created this insatiable demand for Canadian currency. And it's created this money laundering cycle that we're seeing again and again. We haven't been very successful at interdicting it, though.
Right. That's very sobering testimony. I think everyone should be concerned about this. There was a private member's bill that would actually make it an offense in the criminal code to lie while you're opening a bank account to a reporting entity or a financial institution. Is that something you think would be worthy of exploration? The reason the government didn't support the bill was because they wanted to put the offense in the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act and not in the criminal code.
So the real problem that I've identified is the only way to prosecute for money laundering under the criminal code is to connect money laundering to a predicate crime. And what we're seeing is there are professional money launderers who distance themselves from the underlying crime. So, lying to a bank, that could be fraud. I mean, it can be charged under the criminal code. But if it were made a specific predicate to support a money laundering prosecution, as opposed to trying to find the drug case, the case I talked about, Project Collector, it added a year or two to the investigation because the prosecutor said you need to link it beyond money laundering to drugs. So you need to get into where the drug network is. So while that's happening, we have suitcases with $200,000 per plane flying from Toronto to Calgary or Vancouver.
Right. And we're due, Canada's due for a Financial Action Task Force review, is that correct?
Yeah, we're up next year. I think we'll start in the spring of next year on the mutual evaluation by the Financial Action Task Force.
Right. And we're under obligation, statutory obligation, to review the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering Act every 5 years. What will the Financial Action Task Force say about Canada since we've missed the deadline to review that legislation?
I think it's something that they will observe. I mean, they look at two kinds of things. They won't look at whether the parliamentary review in and of itself has occurred. They'll ask whether there's technical compliance and whether we're effective at using things. That certainly will come into the mix, though, if the review isn't done.
You're familiar with net worth assessments from the CRA, is that correct?
Yes.
Would it trouble you to learn that the net worth assessments at CRA have gone from about $1,200, $1,500 a year about 7-8 years ago to under $500 a year?
That's very worrying. And typically where I would see net worth, and I'm not a tax person, but where I would see it is where a drug prosecution or a proceeds of crime case fails. So your last resort is to say, well, the target has a lot of assets and no legitimate income. Revenue Canada, please look at them. And that's where that process comes in. So if it's falling, that's very worrying.
Okay, thank you. Final question, about 30 seconds left. Obviously, people paying attention to the news saw this very sizable fine against Canadian financial institution TD Bank in the U.S. The question is, would OSFI be able to detect the same activity in Canada with the tools it has today, or FinTrack?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, but there were worrying signs about TD. So about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a public-private partnership called Project Athena in the Lower Mainland of BC. And it identified that banks were issuing bank drafts to people who were students and homemakers for significant amounts of money, and there was no name on the bank draft, so it became like a bearer instrument. So this was identified for all the banks. All of them changed their practice except for TD. And so what happened was Mr. Justice Cullen, as part of his commission, actually subpoenaed the global chief anti-money laundering officer to come and testify and explain why. And he said we didn't have the resources to make the change, even though it's a massive bank.
Thank you, Mr. Sismer. I have to give time back to the floor.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, MP Chambers. And now to MP Terowitz, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all our speakers today for being here today and for your great presentations. I'm going to direct my questions to the Business and Higher Education Roundtable. Thank you. I'm glad. I'm going to follow up on my colleague and his questions. I'm assuming that the work that you provide, or the placements that you do for our students, you work across sectors and you work across the country. Can you just confirm that?
That's correct, yeah.
And then, so why do you think it's important to provide work to students across sectors across our country?
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of great work helping students get work experience all across the country. The short answer to your question is because we can reduce the duplication of efforts. There's so much work that happens, especially in local communities, where things start from zero. They build a thing from nothing into something, and that, as we know, is the hardest to do. Whereas when sectors or different parts of the country work across, have a mechanism through which to coordinate and collaborate, a hub and spoke model, if you will, a centralized hub that can create resources for any employer. Mm-hmm. And then we understand that the specific employer needs in Newfoundland, for example, are different than in BC, but we can do the bulk of the heavy lifting, provide those resources to the local community chamber. They can customize for that last 20%. And everyone then is learning from each other across the country and building on the work of others and not having to always start from scratch.
And do you have an idea about, I often think that there's lots of great jobs across the country. I'm not quite sure if we have the right information about where those skill and labor needs are. Do we have the data that we need around where the skill and labor needs are that helps us to maybe have our colleges and universities plan a little bit and have organizations like you plan a little bit about how is it that you can start moving students into skill areas where there's skill and labor needs?
I might ask my colleague Matthew to jump in on this one. Thank you.
I get the labor market question. We really do see what we do in work integrated learning as a way to lever young people into the labor market. We spend a lot of time talking to employers to try to figure out what their core needs are, and that's why we say we need curated programming. So we know economists like to forecast. They're not always right. This is part of the limitation and challenge, I think, in Canada when it comes to having the data that we need. But we do know when we talk to employers, they have particularly the big ones, but the small ones too, they have a pretty good sense of where they're headed and what they need. Increasingly, too, employers are looking for skills more than anything, and skills-based hiring. We're hearing that a lot, and work integrated learning as a really compelling way to help young people not just get that applied experience, but then understand the skills they got while they were doing it.
So what I'm hearing from you is you do have the skill and labor data you need in order to be able to, I guess, fill some of those needs across the country.
At a high level, we know in working with employers and staying close to the government that there's need in the skilled trades and healthcare and navigating AI and things like that at a high level, not necessarily at the granular level that you might be thinking about.
Okay. If you have a recommendation about what we could do at the local or regional level, that would be helpful. You talked a little bit about small businesses, and often when I talk to the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and I meet with 50 businesses, they'll all say they have very specific needs, but they don't have anybody to actually fulfill that. I don't know if there's something you want to say, and then I have one last question.
I might, Mr. Chair, quickly jump in on this. This is, in fact, why we work so hard on the curation of our partnerships to ensure that we can flow through the funding to the local Chamber of Commerce, who is best positioned to have that granular, localized labor market information. So we are, again, able to help them in order to help their community.
Thank you. In Europe, they have something that's a youth guarantee. And I wonder, so basically if you are, I think they did in France, youth comes out of a university program, they can't find a job. The government actually somehow guarantees either a training program, a work placement, some additional training. What do you think about a youth guarantee, and do you think that would be effective?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think we know there are examples in Canada of individual institutions that provide that kind of guarantee. The university, I don't know if it's still current, but the University of Regina is one. I think then, I'm not actually the best to speak to that, but I do know that a lot of institutions and students are looking for that backstop. In what form it takes and who should own that responsibility is something that I couldn't speak to with any real authority right at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Now to MP Samari, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Bosco, you have 2.5 minutes to answer my previous question about the model that you were talking about. Well, thank you. The question was, what would be the result of an expansion beyond Quebec? I can tell you a bit more about what we do in Quebec. My role is one of a facilitator. I meet with various representatives of government, of industry, of civil society to see how they are adapting to climate change. And then I also contact the academic network in universities to see what can be done. Let me say one of two things. First of all, the development of business on the ground, which can be proactive in promoting business and finding out what the needs are and establishing the needs. Secondly, we could have a thematic approach where you would have people from different areas that would contact others. And the other thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, we do call for projects where people can work with us on solutions. And another thing, we have a capacity for research that we have increased in our area. We've hired new professors in these new areas, and we look for experts elsewhere, internationally, with respect to universities, there is training at the BA level and at higher levels as well. So that's what we are doing in Quebec. And if we were to get more funding to become a national entity, that the results of what we do could be felt throughout the country. More regionally speaking, We have the government of the Cree Nation, which has asked to be part of the Institute. We're working with them to develop a certain number of projects. And it's very important, we feel, to work on remote areas, to work with people there. Because when you go to the north, further north you go, more you see the direct effects of climate change. And we see that much more than in the south, rather.
And now to MP Davies, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chelyak, I've done a little bit of research here. Natural gas, according to my research, is essentially 70 to 90% methane with small amounts of ethane, butane, and propane. Is that correct?
No, the natural gas you use in your home, for example, would be over 95% methane.
Methane, thank you. So I went to NASA's site, and this is what they say about methane. Methane is a powerful heat-trapping gas. An estimated 60% of today's methane emissions are the result of human activities. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas and is the second largest contributor to climate warming after carbon dioxide. A molecule of methane traps more heat than a molecule of CO2. Methane comes from both natural sources and human activities. An estimated 60% of today's methane emissions are the result of human activities. The largest sources of methane are agriculture, fossil fuels, and decomposition of landfill waste. The concentration of methane in the atmosphere has more than doubled over the past 200 years. Scientists estimate that this increase is responsible for 30% of climate warming since the Industrial Revolution, which began in 1750. You've made a case for the economic impact of selling the product. I'd like to know, is it your testimony here that you think Canada should be expanding our methane emissions, and what would be the economic impacts of the resulting climate change problems that would create on Canada?
I'm not suggesting we expand our methane emissions, certainly. I'm suggesting we expand the use of natural gas in Canada. So,
isn't that the same thing?
No.
You can expand the amount of natural gas that we're doing without expanding the amount of methane that we're releasing?
Yeah, I guess the way we look at it is, if you take a community from oil or propane and move them onto natural gas, you have an emissions benefit there. If you produced and used more natural gas in Canada, yes, inherently there will be a slight increase in methane emissions. But when you're taking someone off a higher hydrocarbon fuel, the net benefit is a positive.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever done a calculation of what the impact of the climate change impacts of that may be? I just came from Vancouver, where we had an atmospheric river last Saturday. We don't have to tell you about the forest fires, the wildfires, the droughts, those impacts, the problems facing with Canada's agriculture sector as a result of dealing with droughts and floods. Do you have any kind of estimate of the cost of an increase in greenhouse gas emissions, which of course your product would contribute to?
What I would say is, if we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions and climate change as a global issue, there's many things Canada can do to help the world. The export of our products to nations that use coal, for example, has a net benefit to global emissions. The resulting effect may be an increase in Canada's domestic emissions, but a decrease in the global emissions. And if we're tackling climate change from a global perspective, then I'd suggest that is something that we should look at quite clearly.
Thank you.
And now we're to MP Morantz, please.
Thank you. Mr. Simser, I just want to ask you, you've written in the past about unexplained wealth orders. And I just wonder if we could get into that a little bit, if you could talk about what they are, how they can be implemented in both the civil and criminal contexts, and what role the federal government might play in encouraging provinces to bring this type of legislation, or whether or not the federal government is well placed to do it itself.
Excellent question. Thank you for it. So in unexplained wealth order, we have two jurisdictions right now that use them, Manitoba and British Columbia. And British Columbia has been the most aggressive with their use of the tool. And what it is, it's an information gathering tool, and it's typically used, and there's about 100 jurisdictions worldwide that use UWOs, or unexplained wealth orders. And what it is, it's a court order saying to someone that's implicated in crime, you have more assets than your known income and assets could support. Where did the money come from? And if there is a legitimate explanation, you know, my grandmother died and I inherited the wealth, that's fine, that's the end of the matter. But more often than not, there isn't. And so that's the stuff that's kind of playing out. In terms of the role of the federal government, UWOs right now are mostly a civil tool. So there are some places where the federal government could think about this. Sanctions, for example. We have a very poor forfeiture regime under the Special Economic Measures Act. And that might be a tool because we do have oligarch money. It's tied up. We don't know what the legend is behind it. And the oligarchs have used very effective advisors to hide the source of their money. The other thing the federal government could do is encourage the jurisdictions that don't have civil forfeiture, PEI, Newfoundland, for example, to adopt it.
Yeah. And are there civil liberties issues around the use of unexplained wealth orders? Could someone argue, for example, well, it's really none of your business how I got my money, and you can't assume it's legitimate or illegitimate just based on how I might respond to your inquiry?
Yes, there are, and I personally think that they'll be overcome, but those are playing out right now in the courts in BC. So, for example, you have money from an investment fraud. It was placed in the trust account of a lawyer who's been disbarred from money laundering. I love the irony of that, Mr. Pelche. And so there's a UWO. Where did that money come from? And so the first challenge is, well, this is a civil liberties issue. But Cullen's report said, on balance, when it comes to these things, that it is charter-proof. It will survive a charter challenge.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to go to Ms. Vandenberg. I wanted to see if I could get you to expand a little bit on the issue of digital income verification, why it's so important from your perspective. And part of what I'm thinking about is I recall last spring Sam Cooper wrote an article about money laundering that had gone on through HSBC, where there had been falsified mortgage applications showing basically fake income letters, and this allowed these mortgages to proceed. So is that one of the reasons you'd like to have this digital income verification, and how would it work?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for the question. We've been actively working with both Finance and Revenue Canada to propose solutions for a digital income verification tool that would work securely within the CRA systems. Our goal is to facilitate access to income verification while maintaining strong boundaries, efficiency, security, all that fun stuff. We think the tool should be free to access in order to guarantee neutrality and accessibility for all Canadians, regardless of their financial situation. And frankly, prioritizing income verification for mortgages is essential. Mortgages are the largest financial commitment most Canadian families will ever have to make, and mortgage fraud is on the rise, and it has been for a while. A digital income verification tool is critical to combat that while maintaining data privacy.
The argument that we're dealing with people's private information that they're providing to CRA on the basis that it will be kept private. So on what basis would a bank be entitled to receive that information? Would they need the consent of the mortgage applicant, for example, to get that information, or would the bank have to obtain it?
Ideally, yes. I will issue the caveat that I am not the IT genius that has the capacity to design what the system would look like. But what I would speak to is the fact that the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre processed more than 63,000 reports of fraud in 2023 alone. And this is in excess of $560 million of loss for Canada's economy. So how the digital income tool is designed to ensure that the most confidential information of Canadians maintains its confidentiality, I am happy to leave that up to the wizards, whether internal to the CRA or if it goes out to an RFP, the bleeding edge technology companies that we have right here in Canada. But the reality is mortgage fraud is on the rise. The pressure to own a home, something that many see as a key milestone of success, is pushing people to desperate measures. I think the expression is build a better mousetrap and the mouse gets better at committing fraud. It's becoming a costly problem for lenders. Research is showing that for every $1 lost to fraud, Canadian financial services require over $3.78 alone to recover.
Okay. Thank you very much.
To MP Sorbara, please.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to all the witnesses. If I could start off with the Mortgage Professionals of Canada. Great to have you with us this evening. I've interacted with your organization for a number of years. One of the changes that we brought forward with regards to Canada's mortgage market dealt with the stress tests. It had been the stress test for insured and non-insured mortgages. The ones for insured mortgages, upon renewal, you did not have to do the stress test or undertake the stress test, a borrower, but under non-insured mortgages, that was not the case. And the change that we made, I believe, greatly enhances competition and choice for consumers. And I wanted to get to hear your thoughts on that change and the other changes that we have made with regards to the mortgage market, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. I think, frankly, the changes that were made to the stress test are essential to maintaining an open market. It allows mortgage renewers to shop around for better rates, better conditions when their term is up. It doesn't keep them held hostage to the lender that they're currently with. Frankly, we're not in the same situation as we were during the 08-09 financial crisis. The economic climate has evolved. Current conditions didn't justify those overly restrictive stress test rules, so we were very grateful to see those changes being made. We believe stress test rules should be reviewed at the time of renewal to ensure that homeowners are not unduly penalized and can access those competitive rates in a competitive market. I think maintaining flexibility in the market for renewers is vital. It's vital for fostering a competitive mortgage environment, and it's vital for fostering an environment that will benefit consumers and Canadians across the country.
Okay. Thank you. And I think it also, we should note that this in no way increases any sort of systematic risk within the banking system or the financial system here in Canada by doing that. And also wanted just to quickly talk about the 30-year amortization mortgages. We made some subsequent changes there. And the way I look at it is if you're able to get buyers into the market, the first thing that happens very quickly is people realize they can build up equity, and building up equity in your home is a great thing. Have you heard feedback from your members? And there are many members in my riding, I know, and all the my honorable colleagues here that work very hard and serve their clients. Their feedback on these changes that we've made.
Absolutely. So I think the feedback that we've been hearing has been exceptionally positive to date. When we meet with our members across the country in our regional committees, and they in turn report back on what they're hearing from clients and Canadians from coast to coast, people are really excited about this. They're relieved about this. Extending the 30-year AMs provides relief for those first-time home buyers by lowering those monthly payments. I think it's a great step. We believe that extending it to not just first-time home buyers, but all buyers would give families more flexibility in managing their monthly payments. It would make home ownership more attainable in the current market. I think it's not going to solve all the housing issues. Like I said, there's no magic wand that we could wave. If there was, I would have a much easier time at places like committee like this. Thank you for having me. But it would provide essential relief for families facing high mortgage costs.
Yes, and I would like to add that, with the reductions that we've seen in the overnight, the key Bank of Canada rate of 125 basis points, that millions of Canadians are saving a lot. It's a tax cut for Canadians. They're saving a lot on their home equity lines of credit and their variable rate mortgages. It's and it's great to see. And we saw 50 basis points this week. And as an economist, and if I put on one just on purely an economic basis, I think we'll see further rate cuts in the months ahead as inflation has been tamed. If I can quickly go to the Canadian Gas Association and Chair, please let me know when my time is up. The Ontario system, if you go to the IESO website with regards to the energy supply, electricity supply, and our energy supply in Ontario, natural gas is a component. A lot of homes in Ontario are heated by natural gas, and it will remain a substantial component of our energy supply system for many years to come as we obviously decarbonize our economy. I would like to add that how important it is that natural gas remains in the mix for the temporary period or the years coming. And I'd like to ask about the investments that your members are making into the grid, please.
In terms of investments in the grid, the gas grid or the electric grid?
The gas grid.
Yeah, so we like to think about there's the fuel the system delivers, and there's the infrastructure system itself. And so what my members operate is the infrastructure, the pipelines underground. And so in Markham, Ontario, we have North America's first hydrogen blending facility.
I visited that facility. It's phenomenal to see.
And so that takes excess electricity, creates hydrogen from water, puts it into the gas pipeline, and delivers a lower emissions molecule to the residents of Markham. There's one in Fort Saskatchewan, and there's a series of projects planned across Canada. Similarly, we talked about methane earlier. Agricultural methane is a large source of emissions in Canada. We are capturing methane from landfills, wastewater treatment plants, and converting that renewable methane into a product we put into our pipelines, which again reduces the emissions profile of the product that we deliver. Those are two examples of cleaner fuels that can flow through that infrastructure system. So I would encourage anyone in the energy policy space to think about the electric system 50 years ago. In many countries around the world, such as the United States and in Canada, we're very, very dependent on coal. 50 years later, we are very dependent on natural gas and renewables. We didn't cut the wires back then because they were coal wires. We cleaned them up. So I encourage you to think about cleaning up the gas system further.
And members, we are moving into our third round now, and we will get through a full third round based on looking at the time. We are starting with MP Howland for the first 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Simser, for your testimony today. I wanted to ask you, you said that Canada is a playground for money laundering. I would say that after 9 years of this government, we're hearing the same thing about foreign interference. Wanted to know, are you concerned at all that foreign actors are using financial crimes such as money laundering in Canada right now as a way to interfere in Canada's financial institutions and within our economy?
Thank you for the question. So yes, I'm concerned in two ways. One is that the Chinese government put currency controls a few years ago. It's created this demand for Canadian money. So it's not necessarily that the government as a foreign actor is here, but they're encouraging people that, for example, within China produce precursor chemicals. They go to the cartels and they come up onto our streets as fentanyl. The other place, which is not so much a money laundering issue, but is a very concerning issue, is cybercrime. And so we have state actors, we have North Korea, we have China, Iran, and Russia, although Russia does it a little differently. So instead of a criminal who wants to sort of smash and grab and do ransomware and get their money out quickly, these are patient and persistent and long-term adversaries, and they're very, very concerning as well.
Right. Thank you. With that, since we're talking about money laundering, Chair, I'd like to move a motion that I had on notice that given the unprecedented $3 billion fine on TD by the U.S. Department of Justice, and given the criminal activity that this money laundering fuels has likely carried in Canada, the U.S. has named Canada as a major money laundering country, and Canada has developed an international reputation for ease of money laundering and has a lack of enforcement. The committee invite Bharat Masrani, Chief Executive Officer of the TD Bank, the Superintendent of OSFI, the Minister of Finance, Bank of Canada officials responsible for the Financial Crimes Risk Management Program, and FinTrack, and that these hearings happen in addition to the regularly scheduled committee work plan, and that in order to accommodate these witnesses, regular committee meetings be extended by 1 hour. This is a big issue that the Prime Minister has said this is an issue, and I was glad to see my colleague, Mr. Davies, raise this in the House of Commons as well just yesterday. And we know that the Liberals have ignored this issue of money laundering. That's why it continues to happen. Minister Freeland sent this committee a letter last year in November of 2023, asking this committee to do the statutory 5-year review of the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act. It's now October 2024, and one has not yet been started. In the meantime, recommendations from the Cullen Commission in BC have been ignored. FinTrack has no teeth when it comes to fighting money laundering. The Liberals are more focused on making band-aid solutions to the Act in different budgets. They failed to crack down on organized crime and drug cartels, especially as these criminals launder the money they get from thefts and extortions through Canadian financial institutions, casinos, and real estate. Over $110 billion is laundered in Canada every single year. Money laundering is serious and a systemic criminal issue that is plaguing Canada and our financial and real estate sectors. We see TD Bank in the U.S. commit the largest money laundering scheme in the U.S. history. TD Bank is the 10th largest bank in the U.S. and second largest in Canada. There's no way that money laundering at TD is just an isolated incident that happened in the U.S. And there's no way that it would stop just at the border. Canada is known internationally, from exactly what we heard today, for how easy it is in Canada to launder money. The U.S. State Department listed Canada in 2019 as a major country of concern when it comes to money laundering. This motion is not to attack any specific institution, but to highlight that the system is broken. Bad actors can operate inside financial institutions without anyone stopping them. The government turned a blind eye to these crimes. FINTRAC has been ineffective in stopping money laundering, and since 2015, the total number of convictions for money laundering offenses have declined, and so has money laundering investigations, but the amount of money laundering being done has not. It just shows how ineffective the system is here. Drug cartels operate with immunity, laundering money through real estate, driving up house prices for Canadians, organized crime runs, smuggling rings, and commits car thefts, then launders the proceeds of those crimes in Canada. And this committee cannot even do a 5-year review of the Act on time. When officials spoke to this committee in February, that Canada's rating on money laundering with the Global Financial Action Task Force in 2021 was lowered. The next review takes place in 2025. The damning TD money laundering scandal in the U.S. should show the urgency for every member in this place to addressing money laundering crimes and put an end to Canada's status as a major money laundering country of concern. Canadians should be able to trust that criminals are not taking advantage of the financial institutions where we keep our savings, invest, and rely on for loans and mortgages. Oversight in Canada must be improved. Regulators must be given teeth to actually hold institutions and criminals accountable for money laundering and financial crimes. More responsibility should be expected from financial institutions. Penalties and fines should be painful and reflect the seriousness of the crimes committed. It shouldn't be chump change or a slap on the wrist to the people that are committing it. And penalties should be a deterrent against negligence or criminal activity. I realize that I'm asking to all extend the time, but we are very open, since this is a very serious issue, to accommodating that to a certain day, like if it's just on Tuesdays until we get it done. So I'll leave it there. And I hope that we can get to a vote quickly on this, on such a serious issue.
Okay, thank you, MP Hallen. I do have a list started. I've got MP Samari, MP Davies.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, pour...
Thank you, Chair. Just to inform the colleagues of the committee that I am in favor of a subject that is so important. The American justice system is really proven that there was a catastrophic situation for TD. Our colleague Jazz has brought up something that is extremely important. If there are people who have to take a flight tonight and are not available, perhaps we can find another time where we can have a thorough discussion of this matter. I'm 100% in support of it. It's important. Thank you,
Ben Diane.
Thank you. Well, in a word, I very much agree with the substance of the motion. I agree with Mr. Hallen that this is an important issue. As he kindly pointed out, I raised this matter in the House yesterday. To my knowledge, it's the first time anyone has raised the issue of the TD Bank, a $3 billion fine in the House of Commons. What I think is important to note, though, is that we've already scheduled a study on anti-money laundering in January. We did that after extensive discussions among everybody at this table, including the Conservatives, a few weeks ago. And they prioritized this study on CRA as the next study to come after this one. So for anybody who's watching, we've established the committee's business for the next 3 months. It's the pre-budget hearings, which we're doing now. Right after that, we would move into the CRA hearing, which is a study proposed by a Conservative colleague and I believe by Monsieur Samari. We agreed to that. Then we agreed that we wanted to try to issue a report highlighting and summarizing all of the excellent ideas we're hearing in the pre-budget hearings before Christmas. And then we would get to anti-money laundering in the very first meeting coming back in January. Now, at the time that we discussed that, the issue of the TD money laundering issue was already in the media. I'm not sure that the $3 billion fine had been announced yet, but it was certainly there. And anti-money laundering has been on our agenda and our radar as a very serious issue, as Mr. Howland eloquently pointed out. The real question is, you know, do we now want to revisit that and add time to this committee meeting? We set Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3:30 to 5:30. Adding extra time to that is a disruption to the well-established schedule of this committee, and as well as it was not a proposal made by anybody a couple of weeks ago. So yes, I agree we need to get to it. This is a very important issue. I think it's been with us a long time. I think some of the testimony today has indicated this has been an entrenched problem. I think Mr. Howland himself says it's been going on for 9 years. It's been going on for longer than that, but it's been going on. So I would say this is a very important issue, but I don't think it's urgent. I think that we can deal with it when we begin the study in January. I am concerned about starting to tack on ad hoc witnesses after regular pre-budget hearing committee meetings on this subject now in October and in November, and without the proper context and focus and concentration, and then pick up evidence in February. For example, the first witnesses I'd want to hear from is I'd want to hear from FINTRAC, I'd want to hear from OFSI, I'd want to hear from the law enforcement agencies to get an idea of what actually is the context in which this is occurring. I wouldn't want to call TD Bank first. They're the subject of the issue. I wouldn't know what to ask them yet. I want to be fully briefed and informed on what the legal and prosecutorial situation. I learned more about it from Mr. Simser today than I've learned at all. I want to hear more of that. So I'd like to take an organized, concentrated, rational approach to this subject that would focus entirely on this issue with no other distractions. And the way to do that is to stick with what we've already agreed to, which is dealing with the anti-money laundering study that we've already scheduled for January. In lieu of that, what I would be propose is to let the Conservatives swap the CRA study that they decided they wanted before the anti-money laundering study, and they could switch it. So I'm happy to move up anti-money laundering, and we could deal with that immediately after we finish our pre-budget hearings, which will happen in a matter of a few weeks. I'm happy to do that if the Conservatives believe that it's a more important priority than their study on CRA. But I'm not in favor of adding an hour to this meeting. My final point is, you know, this is Western alienation is a real thing. For those of us who live in British Columbia, sitting till 6 o'clock on a Thursday or 6:30 means we don't go home Thursday night. That means we go home Fridays. And for those of you that come from Central Canada or can get home, that doesn't matter to you. You can be home Thursday night, but we don't get home until Friday. And if we turn around on Sunday, we don't get to spend as much time in our constituencies where I want to be hearing from the people in my riding about what's important to them. So, you know, for that reason, I'm in favor of the substance of the motion. I think it's a great idea. I want to thank Mr. Allen for bringing it forward, but the scheduling of it, I don't think is appropriate.
Thank you, MP Davies. I've got PS Bendayan next, and then I've got MP Chambers, I believe. Yes, MP Chambers? You were on it on the list? Or
Yes,
no?
please.
Okay, but I've got PS Bendayan and then yourself. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I regret and would like to open with my regrets to the witnesses who've made themselves available to the committee and for whom I'm sure it's very frustrating to sit through a lengthy debate on a subject that is not the pre-budget consultations that you prepared for. Mr. Halan, you've introduced your motion and with a lengthy introduction that I don't think I will rebut word for word, other than to say that we had proposed to strengthen enforcement. We had proposed to strengthen FINTRAC. We had money on the table to finance the Canada Financial Crimes Agency, and the list goes on. And when that was before this committee, when those proposals were before the Finance Committee, the Conservative members filibustered for 20 plus hours. I would also note that it was the government that suggested and included in the programming motion the anti-money laundering review that we will be undertaking, and I look forward to that study. And I would agree with the suggestion that my colleague Mr. Davies has just now proposed to extend that study. We are open on the government side to extending it by 2 or 3 meetings, depending on the list of witnesses that we agree to. I, for one, had questions for the witnesses that are still here. I could prepare amendments to this motion. I think, as everybody realizes around this table, there is agreement of a majority of members between Mr. Davies and colleagues on the government side. And so if you would like, and if it is the will of the committee, I can prepare those amendments and submit them to the clerk before the end of the meeting, hopefully today, and we can continue with questions. Alternatively, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to go through the amendments now. It does appear to me, therefore, that we will not get back to witness questioning. And Mr. Speaker, I could read them into, Mr. Chair, I could read them into the record if you like. But I would also like to point out that I am in agreement with my colleague opposite regarding the importance of listening first and foremost to OSFI as well as Bank of Canada officials.
Yes, Bendayan, just on the amendments, you're proposing these amendments, yes?
Yes, I'm happy. Also, I recognize that there is a speaking list, and I'm not sure if my colleague, Mr. St. Marie. I'm not sure if my colleague, Mr. St. Marie, wants to speak to the fact that something that was quite important to him, notamment, Monsieur St. Marie, c'était très.
Something that was very important for you to proceed with the study on the CRA and to hear the Minister of National Revenue. So what I suggest, we've worked hard all together in large part because we have met the requests of colleagues from all sides, and it is in that way that we've been able to achieve things, and we have a motion with respect to our calendar for the coming weeks and months. I think it's important to continue as we decided beforehand, but given the hour, Chair, it's 5:28. I move that we adjourn the motion, the debate on the motion before us.
Debate on the motion. So, Clerk.
The question is, shall the debate be now adjourned on the motion of Mr. Halan? I'll start with Mr. Baker. In favor. Ms. Zarowitz?
In favor.
Mr. Sorbera?
In favor.
Ms. Thompson?
In favor.
Ms. Bandian?
In favor.
Mr. Chambers?
I think I'm going to be against this one.
Mr. Halan?
Against.
Mr. Kelly? Mr. Morantz?
Against.
Monsieur Sainte-Marie?
Contre.
Mr. Davies?
En faveur.
Yes pour 6, nays contre 5.
Okay, so we've adjourned the debate on the motion, and now we're going to get back to our witnesses. But I am looking at the time, members. We've got about 10 minutes. The Conservatives already had their opportunity, so I'm going to go to the Liberals, and then in the Bloc and the NDP, and that's how we're going to finish off. I'm going to divide up the time. Each will have 3 minutes or so for each party. So who will be the speaker for? Joanne? Okay, yes. MP Thompson.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm pleased to get this opportunity. Thank you to all the witnesses. But I want to just focus very quickly on the business of higher education. And it's probably going to be you, Mr. McKean. And I follow with my colleagues the questions they've asked around what your process looks like. And I'm very proud of an organization in my riding, EcoNext, who I think is going to provide a more tangible example of what your process looks like and why it is so impactful. EcoNext is a not-for-profit. Their mission is economic development, and it's a link of the economy and the environment. And of course, very proud to talk about the wind energy and hydrogen and the work that's happening in the province to really move us into a cleaner, a green economy. They have a Green Jobs Bank, and they help industry and SMEs to build a workforce. Could you speak to your role in how you empower EcoNext and therefore and the organizations and the industry on the ground to really move this important sector forward?
Thank you for this question. This is one of the examples we came with and are happy to talk about. So in Newfoundland and Labrador, less than half of the students get a work experience. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth there, and we're keen to play a bigger role in your region and in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we're very proud to partner with EcoNext and with Memorial's Entrepreneurship Center to create career pathways. I think our partnership is for 300 students in to get into the clean energy sector. So this is part of us leveraging our funding to create the HR capacity, the mentorship and assessment capacity on both the EcoNext side and the post-secondary side to create what we hope will be a sustainable, by which I mean not green, but like long-lasting after we're gone partnership.
Thank you. And how does your programming help address Canada's labor force challenge?
Oh man, that's a good one. Do you want to try that one?
Sure. We've looked at this. Thank you for the question. We've looked at this question specifically and have a paper coming out shortly that speaks in more detail to this. But WIL provides the ability to create targeted workforce development in sectors of the economy that have the highest growth potential and have the highest productivity potential. And exposing students to careers in areas of the economy that they might not think was where they wanted to start, it gives them an opportunity to see the impact they can have in a place where they might not otherwise have thought it was where they wanted to go. So it has a huge and clear, direct impact on Canada's economic competitiveness, and it's our productivity challenge.
Thank you. Johnson, now to MP Samari.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you very much. Chair, a last question for ETS. How would this funding, which you're requesting for your incubators like Santec, how will that help you, and what will be the impact on the economy of the country for striving for cutting-edge technologies? Well, the impacts can be numerous. It will help Canada be a leader in cutting-edge technologies. We know that there are startups in technology, leading-edge technology, that don't have the funding that is necessary. I would like to give you the example of health, where they have an ETS incubator. Over the past 5 years, they've been able to create more than 3,500 jobs just to support that. These are economic spin-offs that I'm talking to you about, and that is something that has arisen in the area of leading-edge technology. But perhaps Eric would like to add to what I have just said. I could just mention one other thing. Increasingly, we're talking about technological sovereignty within our country, where we want to have technology that we can count on for our economic development, but also for our defense, the defense of our country. We can't depend on China for certain technology, nor can we depend on our American neighbors or the European Union. So you have to understand that these technologies are developed in high-tech incubators. And more than half of the businesses that now use AI in aquaculture and other types of technologies. This is something of the future, and it can broaden across Canada.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. Avez-vous un...
Thank you very much. Do you have, in 40 seconds, a last word to say? Well, one other advantage in job creation and economic impact, but there's also the marketing of this type of thing that will help to accelerate the commercialization and marketing of these types of technology if we work together. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. St.
First of all, again, I want to thank everybody for excellent testimony, and giving you 5 minutes on these important subjects is never enough. So thanks for being so succinct. Mr. Hume, I want to give my last time to you to sort of finish off your thoughts. And I'll seed you with one question. In your view, what steps should the federal government take to support the establishment of housing ETFs, or any policies that you think may help in more Canadians get an affordable home in this country?
Thank you very much, and thank you all for this opportunity. You've heard again today about housing affordability over and over again, and the real problem is that house prices are too high. The federal government keeps pulling the same two levers, and they've been pulling them for decades. Longer amortization periods at the CMHC and higher mortgage insurance limits. And prices just keep going up. Those levers aren't enough. We need new tools. The house price ETF should be one of them. It wouldn't be a magic wand, but it would be helpful, and it would set the tone for more innovation. We need to keep innovating in financial products, in housing, and the federal government does have a role in facilitating that innovation. I think it's fairly straightforward. Signal your interest in that at this committee. Study new innovations, not the same old levers again, and modifying those, and ultimately mandate the CMHC to provide support when industry seeks it to get these new products off the ground. There's a role for government in that, and I hope this government takes those steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, MP Davies, and we want to thank our witnesses. Thank you so much for your testimony, for your expertise, for the recommendations that you have brought to our committee on these pre-budget consultations before our budget 2025. Thank you so much, and we wish you the best with the rest of your evening. Thank you. We're adjourned.